Hi, welcome. So in today's video, we're going to be looking at how, while playing a game, you could always look for a checkmate and that could define the very nature of your game. And specifically, I'm going to be talking to you about a tactic called attraction. So let's think about, what's the goal of chess? The ultimate goal of chess, it's a zero-sum game, it's to win the game. And in order to win the game, one of the most elegant way of achieving that is a checkmate. And when you're playing a game, it's often, you kind of get lost in the actual moves of the game that you really don't think about checkmate. It needs a meta level skill to go up and say, is there a checkmate possibility? And what I'm going to be showing you today is that how you could use imagination and creativity that can help achieve this. So let's get to a drawing board. So let's take an empty board and say, okay, I have a king on g1, which is kind of like a standard position for the king once it has castle. And obviously to checkmate, I need some piece, right? The smallest piece that can checkmate, which is not the queen, is basically the rook. So let's say I have a rook here because after castling, my king could also be something like this. And, this is the one check that I have, but it's not a checkmate because the king can capture it. But in this case, if I were to imagine this king to be on h1 instead, then there is a possibility of a back rank. So I could have this king here, and I could move this rook here, and this would be checkmate in itself if there was a barrier. But unfortunately, that's not the case. The king is here. Making the king move here could be a way in which I could achieve this goal. But I still need a pawn. But let's say in our position, we have a pawn on h2, but none on g2. So the pawn on g2, the white pawn which was earlier there, was acting as a barrier for the king to escape. And now that the king doesn't have that pawn, white doesn't have that pawn, so you need somebody else to control that. So let me say that I have a knight here that's going to control this square. In that case, is there a checkmate possible? Even at this position, I would say there's no checkmate possible. But let's say I have a queen here. Is there a checkmate possible? Yes, there is a direct checkmate like this, which means I need to prevent that. Say, let's assume for a second that I have a knight here. So this checkmate is prevented. Can I still do a checkmate? And the answer is yes. So I need to sacrifice my queen, attract the king to the edge, and then I have a checkmate with the rook. So this is an example of how you could creatively think, with an empty board, with a certain amount of imagination. Because as I said, this is just a drawing board. I can introduce and remove any piece that I want because it's my fertile imagination to think about the pieces that I want to make this checkmate happen. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, I need a back rank mate. I need somebody to block or control the square. So I put a bishop here, a knight here on e1. I need to move the king to h1, which would happen only with a forced sacrifice. So it's a zugzwang move. I'm capturing, I'm giving a check. The king can't escape. He has no other option but to take this. And then I have a checkmate, a very elegant checkmate, a back rank mate that gets the game done. You could say, okay, this is all imagination, is not going to happen in an actual game. Very true. In the actual game, you might not have a knight here, you could have a queen here. Right, so a black queen on d5, a white queen here, and this might not be checkmate because when I give this check, king captures, rook check, and I block it. But you have a pin on the queen. So what if I had a bishop here? So let's go back to the starting position again and say, now do I have a possibility? And the answer is yes. So I give a check, king is forced to capture, rook check, queen blocks it, and there's a knight, the bishop check. And the queen can't block it back because that's pretty much a checkmate. You could say, okay, you have all these pieces. Literally a queen, a knight, a bishop, a rook, and white just has one queen. Maybe he has more. What if his rook is here? In that case, what happens? that would still be a checkmate because queen check, king captures, rook check, block, bishop check. You could either block it here or here, it doesn't matter. You can still capture it. It's checkmate. King can't capture the bishop. Knight can't capture. I mean, the queen can't capture the bishop because it's on the pin. And that's checkmate. Okay. So the reason I'm showing you this is to say that when you tend to look at your position with a little bit of imagination, because we often make it very rigid. We look at a position and say there's only these things are available, right? But often thinking about the possibilities of where the checkmate can actually happen, letting your imagination run a little wild, thinking about these possibilities of having pieces can help you get to a point where you can actually see this work out. So this actually is a position that was there in an actual Grandmaster game. Now can you look at it? This is very similar to what I just showed you. And in fact, now you can see that there's an actual position, an actual game between Barley and Istok Ellen. I think it was played in 1981. And in this moment, right, like the pieces are kind of equal. And if you were to not imagine, if you were to not think of a checkmate, you might just play another move that pushes the game sideways. But thinking in terms of checkmate ensures that there is a checkmate in 4 moves here. You can pause the video here and try to solve it. Okay, I hope you were able to solve it given the introduction that I gave to this puzzle, which is you attract the king to the edge, it's a check, you give a check with the rook, queen is forced to intervene, you use the bishop check, and now there are 2 options. You can either block it with this or this. Most likely he'll block it with rook here, bishop takes it, and that's checkmate. So that's checkmate in 4 moves that happened in an actual game. Of course, in the game, the moment the queen sacrifice happened, white resigned. But this just goes on to tell you that when you are constantly thinking about checkmating your opponent, especially when you have a little bit of attacking pieces near his king, you have controlled at least a couple of squares. The rule of thumb that I use is think of the king, think of all the squares around him. If at least 1 or 2 of these squares are controlled by your pieces, that's a starting point for you to think about possible checkmates, right? So for instance, here in this position, the king is exposed. He is controlled by, all the squares around him is controlled. So he doesn't have much freedom. So it kind of resonates with our idea of creating constraints. The moment you have that, thinking about possible checkmates is how you would come up with these magical moves like queen h1, forcing the king to get attracted to a square he doesn't want to go to, and therefore you can actually complete a beautiful, beautiful checkmate. And the game is over all of a sudden. This is possible only if you can bring in this amount of creativity and imagination into your games, and to always have that compass pointing towards searching for checkmates. I hope you found this video insightful. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next one.